What if I told you a single player could turn a rivalry most people have never heard of into a global spectacle? You'd probably say that player would have to be unlike anyone has ever seen, a true maestro who leads billions of eyes whichever way he goes. I am, of course, talking about Lionel Messi, whose move to Inter Miami will, I believe, turn El Clasico del Sol into the next El Clasico. But before I explain, we have to explore how this rivalry began, starting with Orlando City. In about 2 decades, Major League Soccer had doubled its number of teams, spreading the beautiful game to multiple cities across the US. Still, there was a problem. While some of the country's biggest states, from California to Texas and New York, all had MLS teams, there was one notable absence: Florida. Heavily influenced by Latin American culture, Florida boasted a massive population of soccer fans yearning for a local team to support. And their prayers were finally answered in 2013, when a $70 million deal paved the way for Orlando City SC to become the 21st MLS franchise. The man behind this remarkable feat, the savior of Floridians, was named Phil Rollins, who by his early 40s had already done what most of us could only dream of, becoming a director of his hometown club, Stoke City, and helping them reach the pinnacle of English football. Then he set his sights on America, purchasing a small team in Texas only to relocate them to Florida with a singular mission: make it to the MLS. And in only 3 years, he did just that, driving his club to 3 titles and 2 championships. At last, Floridians had something to get behind and celebrated their club's rise to a league which was beginning to attract global superstars, such as David Beckham. The man, renowned for his dazzling free kicks and incredible range of passing, shocked the world of football by leaving Los Blancos for the MLS. But what made this move so strange was that the league was not in a good place. After losing over $600 million, the MLS threatened to become one of the biggest collapse stories in the history of sports. You'd think a celebrity footballer like David Beckham would avoid this at all costs, especially considering he'd have to take a 70% pay cut to join even the most wealthy team. But instead, he embraced it. He saw an opportunity that most failed to recognize and came to the league with a goal of improving the American game. And thanks to a strange clause in his contract, he was allowed to purchase an MLS franchise after retiring for only $25 million. The only question was, where would he put it? That answer came in 2014 when Beckham announced his new team would call Miami home. Now, Miami is one of the most recognized cities in the world. This vibrant coastal metropolis was renowned for its beautiful sunny weather, stunning beaches, and most importantly, Latin American culture, one in which football is closer to a religion than a sport. So naturally, the people of Miami were crying out for their own team. And nearly half a decade later, they got one, as Inter Miami was officially unveiled and set to join the MLS in 2020. Now all it needed was some players, and immediately Beckham set his sights on Lionel Messi. Although it wasn't the right move at the time, Messi still sent Beckham a very encouraging message.
Hola David, bueno, antes que nada felicitaciones, quería desearte muchísima suerte en este nuevo proyecto, en esta nueva etapa tuya. Y bueno, quién sabe, en unos añitos me hace un llamadito.
For now, they'd simply have to do without him. The owners, players, and fans of Inter Miami worked together to capture a perfect blend of the city's passion, energy, and community. So much so that it became more than just a club, it became an extension of the city itself. Then came the fun part, because building a club also meant dividing the Florida fan base, a move which almost always results in a rivalry. Their regional neighbors were certainly the more established, but after failing to take the MLS with signings like Kaká, it wasn't difficult to ignite an equally competitive fire between the two. Orlando emerged victorious, downing Inter Miami 2-1, and slowly, this rivalry has become known as El Clasico del Sol. Fast forward to 2023, and Orlando were still the dominant team in Florida. Out of their 10 meetings, they had won 5 and drawn 3, even knocking Inter Miami out of the US Open Cup in penalties. And beyond the derby, they've trended in opposite directions, with Orlando a strong candidate for playoffs, and Miami, well, let's just say they're happy US soccer doesn't have relegation. However, all of this looks set to change with the arrival of Lionel Messi. 2022 will be remembered for many things, but most football fans will look back on it as the biggest statement in Messi's career, as he finally lifted the coveted World Cup. But when it came to his club, things weren't so good. PSG, as usual, were looking to make big overhauls, and the Ultras were unleashing their frustration on the Argentine, booing and whistling at him. The man whose world-class performances helped them capture 2 league titles. The man who provided 32 goals and 34 assists in 75 games. Still, the fans weren't happy, and it was clearly time for him to leave. Saudi Arabia leapt at the opportunity, offering Messi $1 billion, an offer you'd imagine is just too good to pass up. but the Argentine had his heart set on a return to Barcelona, who simply couldn't afford him. So instead, he remembered his old friend in Miami and thought how nice it would be to settle in one place with his family, a city far similar to Barcelona in Paris. By June 7, 2023, a 2.5-year deal worth about $150 million, including salary, bonuses, equity, and money from the league's two largest sponsors, was sent his way. The club had done all they could, and perhaps the greatest player to ever grace the game of football set his sights on Miami. At the beginning of this video, I claimed the Messi Effect will turn El Clasico del Sol into the next El Clasico, and I stand by that. You see, El Clasico is a name usually given to the two biggest and most dominant rivals in the country. From Germany's De Klassiker to the France Le Classique, it all means the same thing. A long-standing rivalry between important clubs in important areas, usually with a rich history, tradition, intense competition, and cultural significance. Now the problem is that America sort of already has one. The El Tráfico between the LA Giants quickly became the most popular and intense rivalry in the US, despite one of the teams only just arriving 5 years ago. So to truly be considered the American Clasico, the Florida rivals would both need to improve. And one of the best ways to do that is signing star players like Lionel Messi. The reason we all love watching games like Barca versus Madrid is the unmatched level of quality throughout the teams. Now, Orlando already has a solid lineup, and when Miami are joined by the likes of Messi, Busquets, Jordi Alba, and maybe more legends of the game, they'll be forced to bolster their squad even more. And if that trend of who can make the better signings continues, these teams could easily rise to the top. Another aspect of El Clasico is that it's known by more than just the people of Spain, it's known by the world. Well, there's no denying that where Messi goes, people follow. For example, just look at Instagram. PSG lost 1 million followers just 24 hours after Messi's final game. Any guesses how many Inter Miami gained? It's really unbelievable. The account sat at around 1 million followers before Messi's announcement, a number which already made them the second most followed in the league. 48 hours later, they'd gained almost 4.5 million. Today, they're over 10 million. This makes them not just the most followed US soccer team, but one of the most followed sports teams in America. That is the Messi Effect, and it will bring unprecedented levels of attention to the Florida rivalry. But the biggest part of a Clasico is what it means to the people. Many believe Americans don't like football, and that's simply not true. Football may not be as big in the US as it is in other countries, but as the third most populated nation, it's home to an incredible number of players and fans who all adore the game. But none of that even matters, because you don't need to know football to know Messi. I guarantee that Messi's presence in the MLS will convert casual watchers into passionate ultras, people who just take their kids to soccer practice on the weekends into people who buy plane tickets and follow their club's matches across the country. In the stadium, there will be a noise unlike any heard in MLS history, as Inter Miami supporters cry out for their childhood hero and Orlando fans for their team to slay the giant. And outside the grounds, all cameras, news outlets, and pens will be ready to tell of even the smallest detail in the match. It will have the greatest ripple effect in the history of American sports and put Inter Miami versus Orlando City at the forefront of people's minds, turning this rivalry into the American Clasico.